Okay, Angie has more uses for lavender. I think there's two different spellings for lavender, Angie. I know people spell it with an E and an R. And Raghu says to know more on the herbs, um, what you can do in your home. Well, Raghu, that's a very interesting but very broad topic. Today we're just going to learn how to make homemade salves. Now I will mention the herbs as well, but we're concentrating on the salve today. It's a very interesting little use for herbs, though. So moving on. Thank you for sharing that. I think okay. When you're not speaking, would you please go ahead and mute yourself? I think, Raghu, you are not muted. Thank you. So we'll learn a basic recipe um, about making salves, and we'll then learn to customize that with herbs and other ingredients. And then we'll kind of take a look at the ingredients and choose which ones. Now this is an intuitive do-it-yourself thing, so you can choose the herbs and ingredients that work for you. And then there's some do's and don'ts of salves that I will mention at the end. And then there's some of our favorites that we'll share. And at the end of the presentation, there's a bonus. You don't have to worry about any of the recipes. There's a document that I will share with some of the recipes on there, so you can print that out and use it. So we look forward to that. So let's go into some of the reasons why you should make your own salve. Um, well, because you can get salves in the market, and you can also get creams and lotions. So why should you make your own? Well, one of the reasons that how I think about this is, well, anything that I don't eat, I don't want to use on my body because the skin is very absorbent and it will absorb any chemicals. Um, and the WebMD shows that multiple chemical sensitivities can develop from exposure to chemicals. A lot of the lotions that we have on the market have petrochemical base, or you might be allergic to the mineral oil or the fragrance, and the fragrance is often a chemical fragrance. So to avoid allergies and to avoid absorbing all that through your skin, it's good to use a natural product, and especially if you make it yourself, you can customize it and make a large quantity at very low cost. They are also fun and easy to make. It's just like learning to cook for yourself, or learning to make your own food at home rather than buying everything from the store. It's a simple skill to have, but very useful. And it's also good for the environment because you're not using any fragrance, you're not using any petrochemicals, and you can customize it to your own needs. So just like Raghu said, well, he likes tulsi, you can use that, and Angie can use lavender. So you customize it to what you like and what you need in your life, and then you can benefit from the healing qualities of the herbs and the oils. So we'll talk about some of the oils and the herbs and their healing properties, at least for the ones that were. This is not a broad herbal class, but or a presentation, but we will talk about the oils that we're using in the salve and what the healing properties of each of those are. So any questions so far regarding what we talked about so far? And feel free to unmute yourself or to type it on the chat window. Angie says no questions. Raghu, how about you? Okay. Okay, so we will go ahead and take a look at the basic recipe for basic salve, which is your base, and then on top of that you can add and customize. So the basic ratio is 2 tablespoons of beeswax to a quarter cup of oil. And here an oil can be either olive oil or coconut, any oil that it doesn't, there's no rule about the oil. And the now if you use more oil, it'll make a creamier balm because the oil is more liquid, and the beeswax is hard. Um, Angie asks, what about castor oil? Yes, you can use castor oil, and I will talk a little bit about that. That's a very interesting oil to use in a balm. And about some of the properties. So the beeswax, if you add more beeswax, you can make a more solid balm. So that more solid balm can be as a, you can use it as a lip balm because you need something more solid, or you don't want it to run in your purse, then you can use a more solid one. Now, if you need to change the consistency, you can melt it down again, and you can add either more oil or more beeswax. So we'll take a look at that now. So we're still talking about the basic recipe. You'll use a metal bowl as a makeshift double boiler. And the reason why you won't use an actual double boilers is that they're too large. You want to create a small quantity of salve so you don't have the oil doesn't go rancid. Now, because it's a natural product, when you store a natural oil out on your countertop like that, there's a possibility of it going rancid. So we try to keep, just like we try to eat fresh food, so we try to eat keep our salves and creams fresh. So we use a smaller quantity, a small metal bowl in a container. Then all you do is combine the oil and the beeswax and just melt it over that double boiler, and then pour it into a clean jar. And that is actually a very simple process. And then if you want to customize it, you do more things with it. So you can add a few drops of essential oil, and Angie, you can add orange and lavender. That would be a great combination. If you want a stronger scent, you can add more. So and after the salve is cooled and hardened, then you can do that. Angie asks, do we have to use colored glass? Colored glass for oh, you mean like the container? Is that what you mean, Angie? Oh, for storage. You can actually store it into any kind of container that you like an old cream container or a glass container. This, if you're using, I know you're asking about the colored containers because they protect from light, and they don't let the herbal solutions that we make deteriorate. Now, here we have a oil and beeswax based product. Now, beeswax is out in the sun, and the bees are out in the sun, so that's okay to have that. And as long as you don't put your salve out in the sun where the heat will deteriorate the oil and make it go rancid faster, you don't have to use colored glass, but you can. It's a pretty idea. So here's our basic double boiler. And all you're doing is putting water in the base container and turning on the stove. And then the bowl on top is where your oil and your beeswax will go. And you just let the steam rise and heat up the container. And when the beeswax is melted, you're done. So that's how simple it is. And I wanted to underline that simplicity because I'm hoping that you all will use this on a regular basis. So let's see now. Are there any questions about the double boiler? Yes, very easy. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at, yeah, very simple, Raghu. And I'm going to ask a little question here. So, opening up the poll for you. Do you use commercial creams and do you like them? So I think I have one person waiting to respond. Okay, no, both of you responded. Okay, one of you uses nothing, and one of you uses a natural product. That's good. The natural product. Would you like to share what natural product you use, Angie?
Yeah, I guess the essential oils kind of outed me on this one. I do sometimes use oils, like regular almond or coconut oil with essential oils, maybe for my face at night. But I also do try to buy, if I buy a commercial product, I make sure it's free of chemicals or parabens, anything like that.
Right. That's yeah. That's exactly why we're sharing this presentation today. And how about you, Raghu? I guess you're the other person, so you use nothing. That's interesting. That's also a good thing to do if your skin is up to that.
Yeah, I mean, I usually prefer nothing on my face. So
Okay, yes, yes. I mean, and in the winter is when it begins to become pretty obvious as to whether you would need that or not. Um, okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay. All right. So there's the double boiler. It's that simple, and we will move on to the next slide. Here's what the end product on the basic recipe will look like. As you can see, it looks very pretty. The one on top is in a jar, just like you asked Angie. Was if you should use a colored one, well, that would look very pretty in a colored jar. Beeswax is naturally yellow. You can also buy the bleached beeswax, but it is naturally yellow. And of course, your salve will take the color of the base oil. So if you're using a golden oil like sesame, or it will have a more golden tone. And then if you're using a whiter oil like coconut, it's going to be a whiter product. And you can always dress it up as in that tin. On the next one, you add a little bit of decoration. It makes a great Christmas gift. So. We'll talk a little bit about beeswax. Now, I wanted to ask you about beeswax, if any of you have heard about it. And go ahead and share on that poll. Okay, so one of you said you use it and love it, and one of you would like to know more. That's great. Okay, so we will now learn about beeswax. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Screen is still loading. Okay, so beeswax is a byproduct of honey making. It's basically the cappings on, if you've seen the honeycomb or the beeswax, the honeycomb that they use in that bees use. Bees make beeswax as a byproduct of honey. They collect honey, but they create beeswax as well, and it has a very fragrant. It kind of smells like honey, but a little bit better, and it because it's a byproduct of the honey industry. You're actually supporting. First, you're supporting the honey, you're supporting the bees, and you're supporting, as you know, our bees are dying out, and by using this, by using beeswax, you're actually supporting a natural industry, and you're also probably supporting a local industry because the beeswax that you'll find we in the Pacific Northwest is local. Now, beeswax ranges, when you buy it, it's easy to buy online or at a store that sells natural products. You can get a wide range of product from clean pellets to bulk chips and everything in between. So the pellets, you can buy them bleached or unbleached, and I would recommend unbleached because it doesn't really matter. Your salve is a homemade product. So which would you choose? Let me tell you a little bit about that. First, the clean pellets are bleached and cleaned. The very bulk chips sometimes have a little bit of bee legs in there or a bit of trash. And so which one would you choose? And you can buy a bleached or unbleached product. So open mics here. And go ahead or feel free to type on the screen. Which one would you be more likely to choose?
Rashmi, is there an option for in between, something not bleached but not full of bee legs?
Yes, we will look at that. Yes, absolutely, there is. Yes.
That's the one I want then.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes. Yes, Raghu also chooses not bleached. That's cool. Okay, we'll move on now to the next slide. So here are the different options, Angie, just like you asked. Here's the one. The one on the left is the coarsest, so it's just chips. This is available at a very low cost because the beekeepers are trying to get rid of it. Then the one in between, those are ingots, so they're shaped, they're cleaned, but they're bulk, and you can buy them in 1 ounce or in 1 pound slabs. So there's all kinds of prices and ranges. And then the little pellets that you can see the unbleached and the bleached versions. I kind of like that golden tone because it reminds me of honey and golden honey. So I actually like the yellow part of it. Angie says he can have the bee legs. Yes. Well, once you melt the product down, one thing I'd like to point out to you is when you melt the oil and the beeswax together, it is liquid in the beginning, so you can always run it through a strainer and strain out the bee legs, or put more of your own herbs in, and you'll have a mixed product. Raghu asks the question, aren't we boiling them? So Raghu, we don't want to boil the oil because we don't want the oil. So oil, which is taken to a high temperature, it tends to disintegrate, and the fatty acids break down. So we just warm up the oil just enough so that the beeswax melts and blends with the oil. We don't actually boil the whole product. Now, you can bring it to a much higher temperature if you are not happy with the bee legs, or you can just strain them out. Because if you think about it, the bees have already touched the beeswax. Now, and we'll see in a later slide the properties of beeswax. So beeswax is antibacterial, antifungal, and as the bees have been all over the beeswax, even if when it's cleaned and strained, so it will have bee germs if that's what you're afraid of on it. But that is not an issue really, because beeswax itself is very good for the skin, and it has a lot of healing properties. According to WebMD, beeswax can be used internally as medicine, and I don't recommend you do that without asking your doctor, but it's used for lowering cholesterol. It will reduce inflammation. It's good for ulcers and diarrhea. So it's taken internally. But externally, it will also heal sores and ulcers and on the skin. So it's very good for anyone who has skin issues, any sunburn, any kind of inflammation like that, if you have a scrape. So this is useful when you have little kids in the house who get scrapes. And beeswax is also a natural barrier against moisture loss. So you can actually take melted beeswax and put it on your expensive boots, and it will create a waterproof barrier on the outside of those boots. And it does the same for your skin. But it doesn't block, it doesn't I mean, it's not like a coating. It absorbs into the skin, and it doesn't block your pores. So those are some of the properties of beeswax that is very good for you. So are there any questions before we move on to the next topic about beeswax?
I have a question. Could we use honey in a pinch instead of beeswax, or are they not interchangeable?
That's a very good question, Angie. You can add honey to your salve, but honey, so what we're creating here, honey is water soluble, not oil soluble, and we have an oil emulsion here with the beeswax and the oil going on. If you add honey to your mixture, you want to make sure that you blend it maybe in a blender. If you didn't have beeswax, could you use honey? Well, it will not blend with the oil. And beeswax is an emulsifier. It's a thickening agent, which honey kind of is, but not in the same way because it's not, it won't emulsify with your oil unless you can blend it up and make make a very fine emulsion with it. So if you blended it with oil, then it would be a fine emulsion, and you could use it then. So it's not truly interchangeable, but it would make a
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
What if, like, you're telling us all this really great stuff about beeswax, but what if I don't have beeswax, but I get a sunburn? Could I use honey in a pinch?
Yes, you could definitely use honey in a pinch because it will relieve inflammation. It will relieve your sunburns. It has many of the same medicinal properties that beeswax does. So that's a great idea, actually. Thank you, Angie. Okay, and now we'll move on to the oil. The oil that we use, that's whatever oil that you use with the beeswax. You want to use an oil which is light and absorbent and has a good balance of the oleic acids. So we commonly use olive oil. Now I said that I've listed that I prefer extra light. Now extra virgin has a very strong smell, and many of us don't want that on our skin. So that's why extra light is. Now olive oil is a great light oil. Grapeseed is another great oil for using because it's anti-wrinkle and it absorbs into the skin very easily. Coconut is useful for sunburns. Coconut is anti-inflammatory because it has the lauric acid in it. Sesame is a heavier oil if you need more moisture. Then there's jojoba almond. Almond is a very light oil as well. Jojoba is the closest to our natural oils, but it's still quite heavy. If you needed something a little lighter, I would go with grapeseed. And then argan oil is the new oil out there that it's an imported oil from South America. And if you feel to use it, that's a great substitute. There's also rosehip oil, which is new as well, and that's very healing as well. It's good for wrinkles and healing the skin. Angie, you asked earlier about castor oil. Now, castor oil is a great oil. It's a heavy oil. Castor oil is known to help grow hair. So if you're castor oil is great for eyebrows and eyelashes. It's also an anti-inflammatory oil, so that's great to use, but it will make a much heavier product. And we're already making our salve creamy with the beeswax, so you might want to experiment with that. Castor oil works best when it's blended with a lighter oil, so just remember that when you do. All right, thanks for that thumbs up. Here are some enhancements to the basic recipe. You can add vitamin E oil, you can add an essential oil, you can add calendula oil. Now, calendula oil you can buy as calendula oil, it's an infusion of calendula petals in olive oil. So it's essentially the herb is kept in olive oil for a while, and it gets the properties from the oil. And you can make your own calendula oil. Just make sure that the petals are completely dry so that you don't get mold growing on it. You can use different oil combinations. You can also add shea butter or cocoa butter or mango butter which is the mango butter is the seed of the mango, which is ground up into a butter. So now, which one are you likely to use? Now I'm gonna open up a poll here for you. Both of you answered one of the fancy ones. Okay, really going fancy with our presentation here. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Back to the presentation. And all right, so we're going towards the nicer oils, right? Then we were talking a little bit about calendula oil, and so I would like to talk more about infused oils. And infused oil is simply an oil that has had, the herbs have been placed in oil. All the properties of the herbs get absorbed into the oil. So you may have seen garlic infused or rosemary infused oil for culinary purposes. Well, we do the same for healing. So you can infuse lavender, chamomile, or calendula. Now, calendula is an oil, is an excellent herb for the skin because it's very healing and it's easy to make. And calendula grows very easily as well. So over the summer, if you grow calendula, you can make oils. Chamomile is a more calming oil. You can also infuse rose, or you can infuse tulsi or osmum sanctum that Raghu mentioned earlier, and that's an excellent anti-inflammatory and antifungal as well. So that's a great idea. So just throw the herb into a jar and put oil over it and put it, close it tightly. Usually you let it sit for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then the oil is infused in. There are some special use salves here that we're sharing in the next slide. Activated charcoal and baking soda you can add that to the salve. That's a black salve because of the charcoal. It draws out stings and itches and splinters. If you add clay to it, it helps to shrink, or it acts as an astringent on the skin, and it will help that splinter to stand out so you can remove it. And then the baking soda neutralizes itches or stings if you've had a bee sting or a mosquito itch. So that really helps with that. Peppermint and lavender is a headache balm. Now peppermint is cooling, of course, but it also brings blood flow to the area that you put it on, and lavender is calming because usually we have headaches when we're tense. So you can add essential oils of peppermint and lavender. Now, you can add as much or as little as you want. 20, if you have a couple of ounces of the salve, you can add about 20 drops of peppermint to make it nice and strong. You can also add menthol, which is the active ingredient in many of the headache balms out there. There's a burn ointment you can make if you added calendula oil, lavender essential oil, and comfrey leaves. So comfrey doesn't come in an essential oil, it comes in leaves. So you would want to dry the leaves and then crush them. That will make a green salve, and you can see a picture of it down over there. Using that burn salve will give you a creamy and a consistency, and it will leave a residue of the comfrey leaf on your skin, but it's very good for dealing with that. Then some people use hot pepper cream for joint pain, and you might have seen that on the market. You can add red pepper, the hot red pepper, to your salve, and that's great for joint pain, or if you're out running or hiking. So that is a good one to use. So what we learned today, we learned a basic salve technique, very basic and very simple salve, and as you saw, it was extremely simple. And we talked about some of the benefits from using the salves. We talked about some of the enhancements we can do to a basic salve to make it fun and customize it. And we talked about some special salves here, and I'm going to go ahead and share out the recipes for you as well. So, well, that's all I have for today. And does anybody have any more questions? All right, no questions from Raghu. And Angie says, none. Very informative. I am. Regu says, I'll have to prepare one to get more. Yes. So now, yes, you try the recipes, and the only thing you need to look out for is not to add any water base to your salve right now. Just make sure it's clean in a clean container, and that's perfect. And I hope that you will all try to make your own maybe this weekend. Thank you very much, everyone.